Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Maryland Real Estate Lady podcast. And I am a licensed Maryland real estate agent here in the great state of Maryland. And today I am with Brittany Bobs. Brittany, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Brittany Bobs. I am a local lender in Maryland. I work in Pennsylvania, New Virginia as well, but mainly in Maryland. And I've been in the business for 21 years.
So today's topic, and I forgot to mention I work with Remax Experience in Pasadena. Today's topic is about first-time homebuyer grants,
Mhm.
facts versus fiction, because we started talking a little bit before the podcast, and it appears there's quite a lot of fiction going
Mhm.
on when it comes to that. So I'm
Mhm.
gonna just let you take the floor, and we'll see what grows out of this conversation.
So I get asked about this quite often. Most first-time home buyers ask me this question. There are very few that don't. And so I think it's important to tell people the reality of it because things that you see online or hear, it's like marketing. So it's not always like it doesn't tell you everything. So there are different types of grants when you're buying a house. There are grants that are truly free money. So it's like those are typically based on a specific area. There's a lot in Baltimore City because people are trying to incentivize people to buy in the city. So there are true grants where it's truly free money. And that's usually dictated by a specific location or sometimes depending on your profession. Like teachers, you might get some extra incentives. So that is one piece of it. That is not tied to a lender. That's usually tied to a specific county or area, like a funded program that's within a certain location that's giving you the money. So then there are down payment assistance programs. So people like don't always associate the things properly. So there's grants and then there's down payment assistance programs. Down payment assistance programs are usually tied to a lender. That's typically like zero down, is what you might hear. Zero down programs. Those are somewhat different. There's different things that go into that. And I'm not going to talk for the rest of my life about it because it's like, too much. But the basic concepts are when you're getting a zero down program, typically there is money that's given to you in the form of a loan, typically like a second loan. So you have like your regular loan
Your
that you're
conventional,
just
your
getting.
FHA.
FHA, yeah, right. FHA or conventional. And then you have a second loan that's typically associated to give you the gap. So, like, let's say with conventional financing, you usually do 3% down. So, you're
Yep.
getting your regular 3% down conventional loan, and then you're getting a second loan of the 3% that gives you that zero down. So, that's how many of the programs like Maryland Mortgage Program is. It gives you like a silent second in the form of a loan. Sometimes it's in the form of a gift that's forgivable after a certain period of time. But that is typically not free money because of the fact that it's either a loan that's expected to be paid back when you guys sell the house or when you refinance. So I had somebody um, just a couple of months ago, I was trying to refinance her. She bought her house years ago and we get the payoff. And I'm like, did you know that you have an extra $18,000 that you owe to the state? And she said, no, what do you mean? And I was like, did you use a grant program or zero down when you bought the house? She said, oh, yeah, I think I did. I'm like, okay, well, now you have to pay $18,000 if you want to refinance to a lower rate. And she was really upset because she's like, well, I guess I'm not refinancing. So you have to like look at the small print when you're buying a house because lenders don't always tell you the reality of it.
And that sounds like a misnomer too, because to call
Mhm.
it a grant is usually free money. Like
Mhm.
when you do a
Mhm.
grant for a science program or for research or what have you, it's always free money.
Right, right. And that's what people don't understand. The other thing is, so there is, let me backpedal for a second. So there is a loan option, like I said, that has to be paid back. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the house, you have to pay it back when you sell or refi. Then there is an option that's a forgivable loan or a grant, a forgivable grant. So basically, that's like after a certain period of time, usually 5 to 9 years, that becomes forgivable. But you have to sit in that loan for that time frame. And you can't refinance or sell within that time frame, or else you get penalized by having to pay a fee or having to pay the amount back in full. So
Interesting.
the other
So,
catch on top of that is that when you're in those programs, the interest rates are higher.
hmm.
So, like, think about that for a minute, right? You have to
So
sit in
the
the
free
loan,
money you're supposed to get, you're
free money, but
is
your rate's higher, and you have to sit within a certain time frame within that loan. So typically, you are paying back in a way that money, because you're paying it at a premium.
so usually you'll have to, so they'll give you an agreement and it will be a grant, and then you will have a repayment set up, and then it will also be at a high interest rate, but it's
Mhm.
forgivable in 10 years. So even if they lend you like $18,000, if it's a high interest rate, you could still be paying that $18,000 and then some back in
Correct.
5 to 10 years.
Correct. Right. So it is a good program for people that truly need it. Some people really don't have any means to pay a down payment.
Hmm.
But I always tell people the reality of it. This is the reality of it. This is what it really looks like. So I want you to know this is what it looks like. So later, if you want to refinance or sell, you remember, oh, yeah, Brittany told me. Not some lenders don't tell people. I heard a story from a title company rep told me a few months ago. She was sitting at a closing table signing docs, and the lender was sitting at the table with them, and the borrower said, um, do I have to pay this money back? So she's at the closing table and she asked that question because he didn't tell her. And then he said no. And then the title company said, no, no, there's a document right here that says that you have to have this loan for 9 years or you have to pay it back. And she literally sat there at the table and like corrected the loan officer, and the person didn't even know. So like, you just want to know what you're doing, because again, it's not a bad program. I'm not poo-pooing it. It's not a terrible program. It can be good for people that need it, but you need to know your options. Your options are, this is an option for you. Another option is, do you have a family member that'll give you a gift? Another option is, do you have a retirement account you can take a loan from? If you take a loan from your retirement account, you're borrowing against your own asset and paying yourself back with interest.
Like
You
almost
know?
like a refi.
Right. So it's like there are different options, but you just want to look at the options. These aren't bad programs, but you just want to know everything that goes into it.
Is part of the reason that the lender or the loan officer might not have known or might not have shared that because there are so many assistance
Mhm.
programs?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Right. I'm making like generalizations because there
Hmm.
are different things that go into it. It's typically what people use in Maryland is the Maryland Mortgage Program. It's called MMP. That's what
Hmm.
most people use. And within MMP, it's typically a loan that's given of 3 to 5%, or it's a forgivable loan of 3 to 5%. That's what's typical in a lot of the zero down programs. But there are so many different variations of options for people.
Now, is that something that different mortgage brokers try to come up with themselves, our programs, or okay, so that's the purpose of a mortgage broker business.
So it depends, because MMP is its own thing. MMP is like funded through the state. Only certain lenders can utilize it. I can utilize it. Usually big lenders can utilize MMP. They have partnerships with MMP. There are like internal programs, like portfolio programs, where some lenders have their own variations of grant programs. Like we have our own variation of a grant program that gives you $4,000 that is no strings attached to it. If your income's at a certain level and you're a first time home buyer, we give you $4,000 with no strings. Like, here's $4,000 towards your closing costs or your down payment. So every lender, well, not every lender, but many lenders have their own variations of things as well. That's a more like portfolio based or whatever their company put together.
Okay, so you would say like researching lenders when you're going to buy a house
Mm-hmm.
is probably just as, if not more important than finding the right real estate agent.
Yes, it's very important because lending is, again, like I said, the buyer that's at the table signing documents, not knowing she has to pay thousands of dollars back if she refis or sells within 9 years. Like, you want to work with somebody that's transparent. I always tell people, look at reviews. Go online and look at reviews. If you're looking up a particular, don't look up the company, look up the loan officer and look
Mm,
up the company.
okay.
Because if you look up the company, it might have good reviews, and you look up the loan officer and they have no reviews. That can be a red flag. Why do they have no reviews?
Oh, that's really good to know. I didn't even think about that. So I went with a real estate agent when my husband and I bought our house a long time ago. We went with a real estate agent that we just trusted, which sounds like is also part of the process is finding somebody that you really trust and
Mm-hmm.
like trusting them to hook you up with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just don't even know where to start, like say you're like I was a voiceover artist, like had my own business, did not think being able to buy a house was even within my purview. And then we talked to an actual real estate agent who was like, "Oh yeah, you probably could." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, okay." So we went forward with that and it was we had no idea where we were even starting. We wouldn't have even known to go like research mortgage brokers at all. We just went with whatever we were told.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's not necessarily bad in its own right, because typically, like, a realtor, if it's a good realtor,
Hmm.
they probably work with a decent lender, because that's who they're choosing to work with, and they've seen the downside where lenders can just blow up. That's not a bad thing because it's a referral, and referrals are typically, vetted in some fashion. But if you have a realtor, like there are newer realtors or realtors that don't have solid relationships, they're kind of all over. There's some realtors that are not very relationship based, and that's a lot of them. And they just pick whoever happens to ask them to go to coffee. I'm going to give you a referral, and then they act like they know them, and then it can go south because they don't really know the person they're referring you. So
Yeah.
the referrals are good in their own right, but I always tell people, look up reviews for a loan officer. A loan officer should have reviews. They just should. If they don't, that's a red flag. Why don't you have any reviews? Or you might see bad reviews, truly.
Yeah, well, as if somebody messed you up and like when it came to delivering information about a loan, I don't leave many bad reviews, but that would probably do it for me.
Yes, and it does happen, and things happen and people have their own experiences, but it's just something to look up and do your due diligence and looking at who you're talking to, because it is important. It can cost you a lot of money if you're talking to somebody that's not actually looking for the best program for you.
Okay. And having a loan officer that has been doing it a while, probably, I would assume, is with some great reviews. Are there any other red flags that you can name right off the top of your head that people listening to this podcast should be like, oh, I didn't even know this was a thing, but I will avoid this person, or something that's really great that they should go with that mortgage lender.
So, a red flag, I tell people this all the time. So, you're going to get, if you're working with lenders, you're going to get spammed typically, because typically when your credit gets pulled, you're going to have spam calls. And that means those are trigger leads. That means that your info got sold to telemarketers. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and he's like, well, this person's telling me that they'll do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's not real. What they're telling you is not real. Send it in paper. It was just something that I just know is not accurate. And I'm like, tell them to send it to you in paper and then send it to me. And then I'll tell you if it's real, but I don't think that's real. So the reality is you have to watch. If somebody's just calling you out of the blue, that person is probably a telemarketer. And I'm not trying to talk bad about anyone's profession, but telemarketers, their job is to get you on the hook. Their
Yes.
job is to tell you what you want to hear.
They're salespeople.
Correct, whether it's true or not. So, like, that's always a red flag to me. Like, somebody's not gonna call me and I'm gonna pick up the phone and be like, here's my social security number. But you would be surprised how many people do that because they don't realize.
They sound real. A lot of times I had somebody, it was like 10 years ago, they called me and they wanted my social security number. And I was like, but you're calling from the IRS. And they were like, yeah, yeah, the IRS. And I was like, well, you should have it. What is
Right.
it?
Why
They
don't you
were
probably know better than I do? Why don't you tell me my social security
right.
number?
I was like, if you're from the IRS and you're calling me, like I said, private business, young, like early
Right.
20s. I was like,
Right.
you should know all about me.
You should know everything.
Yeah.
So that's a red flag. People that are telemarketers and they're probably just telling you what you want to hear, even if it's not true. And then I would say, honestly, what I tell people is if you're trying to shop lenders, which is understandable, I will flat out tell people if they're like, I'm talking to Rocket, I'm talking to so and so at First Home, and I know who so and so at First Home is, and then they're like, and I'm talking to you. I will flat out tell them, please, please, if it's not me, talk to so and so at First Home. Please don't talk to Rocket. Because the reality is, when you're working with these like big lenders that are not local, Maryland is quirky and it's got quirky things attached to it, like closing costs that get misquoted constantly. I was talking to somebody this morning about how grossly their closing costs were misquoted by an out-of-state lender, and I explained to them why. Like, and the reality is, like, lenders can say a lot of things, and then 2 days before closing, it's not at all what you thought, and lenders are like, whoops, and there's no recourse. People say, oh, I'm going to sue them. You can't. Like, it is what it is. If you want the loan, this is it. Like, deal with it.
Wow.
And so, like, the reality is, like, I think I am a big I'm a big advocate for local. Work with somebody that's local, that knows what they're doing. The reality is, you're going to get 9 times out of 10, your entire experience is going to be so much better working with somebody that's local.
Yeah, smoother too, with more
Mm-hmm.
information and like more in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you mean because I remember talking to Rocket Mortgage and it's not that it's a bad company,
Right.
it's not specific enough to what we have in the area because Maryland is very, I was talking to Pasquale about this a couple weeks ago on my broker's Pasquale Caronante, and a couple weeks ago he was saying like the laws in Maryland, a lot of people huff and puff because there's quite a lot of them,
Yeah.
but most of them are in place to protect buyers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
really good to work with a local lender and a local real estate agent. So Redfin real estate agents, before I was a real estate agent, there was a Redfin agent that worked with someone very close to me and they got their house sold for them. And the person whose house was sold, it was a very smooth process. But I, even not being in the industry, was like, that feels really low for your
Mm-hmm.
house based on where you are and what the area is like. And they wanted a smooth process and at the end of the day it's about what you want and what works best for your lifestyle. But I think they probably could have done about 200K better than they did selling their house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. I've heard a lot about that as well. And
Because the
that's
next person who bought the house turned around and sold it for almost 200K more. Oh, it hurt.
just
Yes.
disgusting. It's just
Yep.
disgusting. And that's the thing is, like, I understand wanting to save money because things are expensive, but, sometimes it's just not worth it. Like, you're going to end up paying more. And that's what I tell people. Like, yeah, you might get an eighth better in rate going with somebody else. And to save $8 a month, is it going to be worth like losing the house, losing your deposit, like getting sued? Like, things happen in transactions that can be very expensive. If a lender doesn't perform or your real estate agent isn't doing what they're supposed to do, it's going to cost you a lot more than the little bit.
That sounds terrifying. So,
Mhm.
do you want to expand a little on that? Like what
Yeah.
happens?
So if you're working with, let's say, a lender that there's contingencies in the contract, right? So you have like your application date, you have your commitment date, you have your closing date. Those are all based on lender performance. So you have to have a lender that's going to get your application done within the time frame. You're going to have a lender that's going to get your commitment letter sent to you within the time frame that's required on the contract, and you have to have a lender that's going to close when the closing date is required. These are based on lender performances. If your lender does not perform and do those things within time, let's say they didn't give you your commitment letter in time. If something happens and the deal goes sideways, then the listing agent can start pulling those things apart and realizing, oh, well, you didn't meet this contingency, you didn't meet that contingency, and now you're trying to get out of the contract. Well, we're going to take your deposit. So, however much money you put as your deposit. And I've even seen people like go to court and try to sue people as well for not
For specific
performing properly.
performance and things like
Right.
that.
And it's not the lender. The lender is just going to be like, whoops, you can't go and sue the lender. Like you just can't. So the reality is like it can cost people a lot more money. I'm like, do you want to, even if they didn't meet the closing date, then you have to go back to the seller and be like, can I get an extension? The seller could be like, no, because they might have a backup offer. And I've seen it happen multiple
Mm,
times where they're like, oh, no, no, I had a backup offer after I accepted your offer for $20,000 higher, kick rocks, goodbye. Like you don't get the house. So again, it's a matter of like, are you willing to put all of that out there because you want to save $8 a month? Is it worth it?
right.
Or if you work with a lender that's going to find you a program that's going to save you more money, like we were talking about earlier, like it's not always, people think that it's about rate. People think it's about rate, 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 rate. What's the rate? What's the rate? But there's
The
so much more.
buzzword.
Right. And I get it. That's what people are programmed to ask about. But there
Yes.
are things that are entirely more expensive. Fees, way more expensive that people shockingly don't ask about.
Well, I think because there's so much buzz around rate, what people also don't seem to think about, and I certainly didn't before I started looking around and really comparing like rates and housing prices, is that the prices of housing are going to fluctuate. So
Mhm.
the rates might go down, but if the rates go down, there will be more buyers, and that makes it a very competitive, it can make it a very competitive market when it comes to
Mhm.
selling a house. So the house prices usually go up when the rates go down.
Mhm.
So you're
Mhm.
gonna pay, you're gonna pay in one way
Yes,
or the other.
one way or the, and that's a fact, and that is actual reality because there have been. I was talking to somebody the other day, and rates have gone up over the last couple of weeks, and she said, "I feel like now I'm priced out of the market because now I just need to wait until rates go down." And then I had to have that conversation with her because, the chances of she's looking in a very desirable area that's consistently appreciating constantly. There's
Mm.
no, that area is always hot. And so I told her, like, the reality is you're probably, if you want to revisit it next year, that house you're looking at now is going to be more expensive by potentially even 5%. So
Hmm.
what you're worried about in your interest rate that's $60 a month is next year going to be $120 a month just because of the appreciation in the price. So it is one of those things that people fixate so much on the rate, and I get it. But the number, I always tell people, like, look at the monthly payment. Don't look at the interest rate. You're looking at the
Yep.
interest rate because it seems like that's the thing that you should be asking, but the rate is the rate. Like you can shop and throw your social security number all over the internet, but the reality is you're not going to get 2% lower than what it is. Like you're just
Well,
not.
you could, because then you're going to get telemarketers who are going to tell you you can get that and you might get that, but then you might get into a lot of hot water.
Right, right. And then you're going to get some crazy deal that ends up not being a deal because you're paying a bunch of points. Like there's so many things that go into it that people don't know about. There's so many games and gimmicks, and
Well, I
the
think when you
reality
look at big decisions, right, that you make
is,
throughout your life, you make these decisions where you're like, oh, I'm going to get this amazing deal. It sounds too good to be true. And then maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, you're like, it was
yeah,
definitely too good to be true.
sure was. Yep.
But the best experiences I've ever had, and weren't always the cheapest. It didn't mean that they were the most expensive. It doesn't mean you have to go find like the premier person that everyone's talking about. But if you can find somebody honest who can give you a real picture of what they can do for you. And usually honest people like that, they aren't grabbing for your wallet.
Right,
They're
right.
trying to see if this is a good fit. And that's like the body signals that I think people should be aware of is who are you
Hmm.
talking to and how bad do you feel like they're trying to get into your wallet?
That's exactly right. And that is a huge red flag. If you have people that are pushy, because some people will be very pushy, and I'm not going to push somebody into something they're not comfortable with, because that's just not comfortable to me. If you don't want to do something, I'm like, here are your options. And if you want my opinion on what I think is best, I will give it to you. But I try not to give people, like, I try to just say, this is what it looks like. And then they can say, well, what do you think? And I'll say, okay, this is what I think. But like, what do you think? And here's why. Like, so why do you think that works for you? That's up to you. I'm not going to push you one way or the other. And so if you feel like you're getting pushed into something, you should question, like, why? Why is this
Yeah.
person pushing me? Is it like because they want to make a sale? Because the reality is those people probably don't do a lot of business. They probably are pushing you because they need it. And desperation, like I always tell people, desperation ain't cute and it costs you money. So like the reality is, like, just work with people, I think, that are you're comfortable with, that aren't pushy, that are telling you your options. Don't get into something that you're not sure about or that doesn't feel comfortable
Feels
or right.
when a thing feels rushed, it's usually when it's a big decision, right? Because I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, like you're gonna rush and you're gonna hustle and you're gonna do all those things. So I think sometimes people feel like that is how everything should be. But when it
Right.
comes to buying a house or getting a loan or doing things like that, it should feel organized.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this and you feel like you're not sure about the person that you're working with, just an I'll think about it should elicit either a very pushy response or a cool. And they should let you go. They shouldn't be like hanging on.
Yes. Right. Right. And that will show you very clearly who you're dealing with, because there are people that can be incredibly pushy in this business, and you just want to kind of question that. And it's one thing to be pushy. It's another thing to give you reality. I'll be straight up with people and I'll be like, listen, do whatever you're comfortable with, but the offer's due at 4 o'clock. So if you're not comfortable with that, then don't do it. But it is
Hmm.
due at 4 o'clock. And if you don't send your offer in at 4 o'clock, you're not going to get the house. But that's your choice. And I'm not going to be pushy about it. If you don't want to do it, I'm fine with that. Like, go, that's obviously not the right house for you. So there's like a difference between being realistic, because there is reality and there is urgency in this business. Like, there are things that do require urgency. And so in that case, I'm going to tell you, like, on my end, this is where the urgency is, but I'm not going to push you to do it. If you don't want to do it, that's totally your choice, and I'll be okay with it. Like, I'm not, it, I would rather people have a good experience. And I tell people this, I'd rather you have a good experience and then go tell your friends and your family about me, and
Yep.
then want to work with me too. And you write me a good review and like feel happy when I call you in 6 months to refi, versus like being like, oh my gosh, you are terrible. I can't stand you. I'll never refer anyone to you. I'm gonna write you a bad review. I don't want that. That is not business to me. That is not business that I want. And I want to be able to
Yeah.
sleep at night. So like, it's not worth it. It's really not.
No, and I think that's the part that I think people who are averse to using real estate agents and want to do their for sale by owner and want to do and don't want to work necessarily with they want to work with a big name, a big company, and they have a
Mhm.
hard time trying to trust people that are local because they aren't usually big names. But I mean, I find that AI has become one of my favorite ways to go and just do some research. And it's not that you don't go to ChatGPT and just take everything it says for gold. Ask it for the resources you pulled from and
Mhm.
go look at it yourself and
Mhm.
go make up your own mind. But when it comes to buying a house, researching the people, take your time and try to be very cautious. Not caught. I mean, if you get a good recommendation and you trust the person that's referring you to somebody, typically it's because they've invested the kind of time in
Mhm.
getting to know that person. So
Mhm.
it really is all about relationships. So if you're averse to using real estate agents and that world, I know a lot of people can be, but our whole business and living and everything is based on relationships. You
Mhm.
will do pretty much anything to protect your reputation if
Mhm.
you want to continue doing business in an area.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
So
And
there
that's
is
what
much at stake here for everybody.
yes, and that's what I tell people too about, like, if back to what I was saying with the contingencies in your timeline. And the thing about working with somebody local is, and I can just speak for myself, I know the buyer's agent because 9 times out of 10, they referred me whoever we're working with. Quite often, I know the listing agent. So I am not going to miss a deadline, and I'm not going to have things, the loan blow up because I pre approved you improperly. And because my reputation matters, because I don't want the buyer's agent to stop working with me. I don't want the listing agent to be like, oh my gosh, what a hot train wreck. And I don't want you to move into the house and be like, oh my gosh, and tell your neighbors, my lending experience was horrendous. I worked with Brittany Bobs and she's trash. Like that stuff matters to me because this area matters to me. Its reputation is so important. Relationships are so important. I want people to hear my name and think, oh, she does a great job. I know we're in good hands. Like that is what has to happen as far as my the way that I conduct business. That's the most important thing to me. So what you're saying is 100% accurate. Like it's so relationship driven in this business. And so that's why it's really important to like be cautious about working with random people that you have no idea, especially if they're not local. They don't care. Somebody in California doesn't care about what the listing agent thinks because they're never going to talk to him again.
Yeah, there's no stake in the game.
Right. They just really don't care. They're like, I just want to get your business. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I don't care. And
Which is
that's the truth.
another great question to like ask yourself whenever you're talking to somebody that you don't know is what is their stake? What do they lose if
Right.
things go sideways?
Yeah.
And
Right.
on that note, I think we're hitting are we at 25 minutes? I have really enjoyed this conversation. What's the best way for anyone watching to get in touch with you, Brittany?
So my cell phone typically, which is 410-971-0460, or my email, Brittany, Brittany .bobs, BOBBS at ccm.com. I work at Cross Country Mortgage. So if you just Google my name, Brittany Bobs, Cross Country Mortgage, you'll see me and my
Cool.
contact info.
And we'll throw that down below in the description as well. Or if you're watching on Meta, it will be up above for Facebook, down below for Instagram, and below for YouTube. All right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm Claire Coyle. I am Claire at MarylandRealEstateLady.com. If you want to get in touch about buying, selling, or anything in between, which I'm not sure what that would be. It just felt like a phrase that sounded great, but here I
That's,
am. All
thank
right.
you,
Thanks.
Claire.
Yeah. Have a great one.
You too.